social. We will have many more of these events coming up, and I encourage you to attend any and all of them. This meeting will be recorded, as you've just been told, so you'll have to press continue to approve this. Just a few Zoom housekeeping items for you. You have been muted upon entering the event. This is to alleviate background noise during the presentation. You will be able to ask questions at the end of the presentation. You may type them into the chat box, or you can use the raise hand feature at the end. If you can turn off your video, it helps make a better connection for everyone. If you'd like to use speaker view, where only the person speaking is up on your screen, you can enable that option on the top right-hand corner of your Zoom screen. There is live closed captioning available for this event. You can enable that at the bottom of your screen by pressing the closed caption /CC button and selecting the show subtitle option. The captions will display in the center of the lower part of your screen. We will be showing a presentation during this talk, as you can see with this screen share, so you'll expect that to move automatically. And again, as I said, this is being recorded for archival purposes, so we can share it later, and you can watch it later as well. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Nicholas Martin. Nicholas is the curator for Arts and Humanities in the Special Collections Center at NYU Libraries. He will be starting the presentation, but expect to hear from our entire Special Collections team. Thank you very much, Nicholas.
Good day, everybody. Thank you, Nicole. And thank you all so much for joining us for today's event, Getting to Know Special Collections. Allison and I would like to begin by recognizing the freedom struggle happening outside our windows right now while we give this presentation. I think I speak for everyone in this session when I say that this struggle is important to our lives, and we aim to center it in the work that we do in the library. We've had kind of a hard time finishing this presentation for you with so many actions taking place in the streets and online, but we're here, and let's begin. I want to thank the organizers of this event, including Nicole DeAndrea, Sean Smith-Cruz, and Liz Varelli for their encouragement and guidance as we prepared this talk. Okay, so the NYU Special Collections Center, which opened its doors almost 1 year ago, is made up of 3 previously distinct repositories: the Tammelman Library and Wagner Labor Archives, the Fales Library and Special Collections, and the New York University Archives. We're going to take the title of this series very literally today. And hopefully by the end of the session, we'll all know a little bit more about who we are and what we do. I'll start by discussing the histories of our repositories and our collecting missions. For each repository I mention, I'll try to highlight collection materials that you can access now, remotely. I'll then turn it over to Allison Comet, one of our 3 reference associates, to provide an overview of our new facility and services. At that point, we'll be joined by several of our colleagues, including curators, collection managers, reference associates, and fellows, who will introduce themselves and in 2 minutes or less tell us something that they've been working on, planning for, or getting excited about during this period of working from home. We'll leave time for a Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, leave them in the chat or raise your hand and we will unmute your microphone so you can ask them live. We'll also be sharing a lot of links, as Nicole has just mentioned in the chat. So keep your eyes on the chat. Thank you, Nicole. Let's get going. Next slide, please. Okay. The New York University Archives were officially established in 1977, though library director and professor of history Theodore Francis Jones began the work in 1922, informing what he called the NYU collection. In an article co-authored with Brad Bauer, NYU archivist Janet Bundy, who will join us shortly, describes Jones's work as an endeavor to collect, quote, manuscript records, printed books and pamphlets produced by the university, and pictorial records of the campus and its people. And we can post the citation for Janet and Brad's article in the chat. Today, to quote from the Archives Collection Development Statement, the University Archives serve as the final repository for the historical records of NYU. Its primary purpose is to document the history of the university and to provide source material for administrators, faculty, students, alumni, and other members of the university community, as well as scholars, authors, and other interested persons who seek to evaluate the impact of the university's activities on the history of American social, cultural, and intellectual development. So for me, one remarkable aspect of the university archives is the way in which NYU has been influenced by developments in our parts of New York City and crucially vice versa. There's this amazing interaction between the university and the city that you can track through these collections. Two notable collections which you can access online are the Sailor's Snug Harbor Image Collection, which contains glass plate negatives depicting properties within walking distance of Washington Square around the turn of the 20th century, and the Washington Square Photograph Collection, featuring photos of Washington Square Park dating back to the 1850s. Next slide, please. Okay, the Tamiment Library and Wagner Labor Archives aim to collect materials in the history of labor, radicalism, and progressive social movements. The Tamiment Library was founded in 1906 as part of the Rand School of Social Science, which later became the Tamiment Institute and Library. The collection arrived to NYU in 1963. The Robert F. Wagner Labor Archives were founded at Tamiment in 1977. In a 2013 article in American Communist History, labor historian Larry Carey describes the Wagner Archives as, quote, the repository of the unique and collective memories of the organized working class in New York City, end quote. We'll link to Carey's article now in the chat. Thank you, Nicole. Also based at the Tamiment Wagner Library are the Frederick Ewan Academic Freedom Center, the Center for the United States in the Cold War, and the Archives of Irish America. Notable collections at the Tamiment include the records of the Communist Party of the USA, the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archive, the Eugene Debs Papers, and the Howard Zinn Papers. Collections currently accessible online include the Estela and Ernesto Bravo Film and Video Collection, featuring the Bravo's documentary work primarily focused on political and cultural relations between Cuba and the United States. Earlier this spring, curator for Tamiment Collections Shannon O'Neill, Cold War collection specialist Mike Konsowitz, and reference associate Danielle Nista, all of whom are with us today, presented a session in this series dedicated solely to their current work. So Nicole has shared the link there if you want to check out that recording if you missed that great event. Okay, next slide, please. The Fales Library and Special Collections arrived to NYU beginning in 1957 with the first installment of the Fales Library of English and American Literature, which was given to the university by DeCourcy Fales. Fales's collection was among the earliest to address the English and American novel as a subject, and it is a singular collection in its extensive engagement with genre and contemporary fiction, with particular strengths including Gothic novels, detective fiction, African-American literature. Fales continued to add to his collection until his death in 1966, at which time the Fales Library comprised over 50,000 volumes and 15,000 manuscripts. Collecting has continued in the areas established by Fales to this day. If you're curious about the history of the Fales family, DeCourcy wrote a book called The Fales Family of Bristol, which is available through the Hathi Trust Digital Library right now. We'll post a link to the chat for those of you who have access to that material. Since the 1960s, the Fales Library has become home to several distinct collecting initiatives in the arts and humanities, including the General Special Collections of NYU, the Downtown Collection, founded in 1994 by Marvin Taylor with a focus on downtown New York art and literary scenes beginning in the 1960s. The Marion Nestle Food Studies Collection, which includes one of the largest research collections of food and cookery books in the world. And the Riot Girl Collection, founded in 2009 by Lisa Darms. Lisa wrote a book on the Riot Girl Collection, and that's available online for those of us who are NYU members via the link at the chat. There's a lot of articles about it as well online that are available for free if you're more interested in that. Archival collections available online include the art series of the Judson Memorial Church Archive, which document the pivotal activities of Judson Dance Theater, Judson Poets Theater, and the Judson Gallery, and the Gay Cable Network Archives, which has available for streaming episodes of GCN's flagship public access program, Pride and Progress and Gay USA. Those collections, anytime you see one of these finding aid links, which starts with DLib, those are accessible to anybody, those materials. You don't need to be an NYU affiliate. Next slide, please. We are also delighted to hear today from our colleagues at the Byrne-Dibner Library, which houses the Poly Archives and Special Collections at the Tandon School of Engineering. The Poly Archives are housed in Dibner Library at the NYU Brooklyn campus. The archives contain the records of the former Brooklyn Polytechnic from 1854 to 2014. The archives also contain manuscript collections of professors, researchers, and alumni associated with the engineering school. While materials created by the current NYU Tandon School of Engineering are collected by the NYU University Archives, the Poly Archive still actively collects materials from alumni and professors who spent all or the majority of their careers at Poly. Although half of the archival collection is still unprocessed, we have built a robust teaching and outreach program. Primary sources from the Poly Archives are used in 30 to 40 course sessions on the Brooklyn campus each semester, and we routinely partner with Tandon's alumni relations and development offices to provide tours and lectures featuring archival material. The physical archives are currently closed due to the pandemic, as are all of our in-person spaces, but archival instruction continued remotely using digitized items during spring 2020. The Poly Archives anticipate being back on site in fall 2020 to assist in reference support and to fulfill scanning requests. Collections from the Poly Archives, which are available online, include the Poly Archives Portrait Collection, which includes portraits of faculty, students, alumni, visiting lecturers, and other associated professionals spanning from 1866 to 2007, and the Poly Archives Historic Photograph Collection, which documents the history of Polytechnic from 1857 to 2011. I'm so glad that Lindsay Anderberg, who is the Interdisciplinary Science and Technology Librarian at Poly and Poly Archivist, will be speaking with us today a little bit later, as her presence drives home an important point, which is that Bope's Library on Washington Square is not the only location where special collections work is done at NYU. Indeed, in addition to the Poly Archives in Brooklyn, there is a rapidly developing Archives and Special Collections program at New York University, Abu Dhabi, led by Brad Bauer and Lauren Cada. So we've taken this step in these past couple of years within the main library of uniting 3 previously disparate repositories. And we found amazing ways that we can work together already, only in 1 year of sharing space. So now we can get ready to look forward to working across campuses to further advance our impact on our communities. So that's all I've got for this preamble. It is now my pleasure to introduce Allison Comet, the Reference Associate in Special Collections, who will provide us with an update on our new facility in Bope's Library.
Okay, thank you so much, Nicholas. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. As Nicholas mentioned, uniting these 3 repositories into one department has been the result of a planning, construction, and collection move project that's been underway since 2017 and involves our colleagues in many different departments. We think that serving all of this collection material together creates a much richer research environment where scholars and students can draw connections among all of our important collecting areas that Nicholas just outlined. I want this portion of the presentation to give you a kind of snapshot of where we are now, still very much in the middle of our renovation project, and also now having been away from our building and collections themselves for about 3 months. So we opened our new reading room in September 2019, which you can see a photograph of on this slide. It represents the completion of a major phase of the renovation project. We serve material from all 3 repositories through this reading room. Our new reading room has the capacity for 24 researchers per day and includes 12 tables long enough to support almost all of the oversized material that we can serve. Locker space for researchers and students to store their belongings. A check-in desk staffed by our student colleagues. And then within the reading room, there are 2 reference desks themselves and 2 computer terminals for researchers' use. Researchers are asked to store their belongings like coats, bags, laptop cases, pens, any food, drink, any liquids in our locker area after checking in with our staff. As with many other special collections environments, our library has closed stacks, meaning our staff needs to retrieve collection material for your use. And I'll talk a little bit more about this process in a few minutes, but when you research with us, you'll use materials one at a time, either one folder, one book, or one box of archival material, and our staff will provide detailed instructions on how to handle the material that we've given you. Material being actively used by researchers is stored in the adjacent hold room and not in the reading room. I also want to mention the large role of our student staff in all of this. Our students work at the check-in desk, getting researchers acclimated to our policies and acting as the first contact point for most reference phone calls and walk-in reference questions. Our grad students work with my colleagues, the reference associates and I, in the reading room at the reference desks. And all of our students have shifts standing by to bring material from the hold room to the reference desks for researcher use. So while we completed the reading room, galleries, and classrooms, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, and when we opened them last September, we actually still have quite a bit more to do with our renovation project, which has unfortunately been put on hold during the COVID crisis. So we're currently holding our collection material in 8 different spaces on 4 different floors of Bobst Library. Once the renovations are complete, our on-site collections will be consolidated into storage areas on the 2nd and 3rd floors, and we'll be able to reopen the 2nd floor north reading room as like a publicly accessible reading room to all NYU students and faculty, which has been used as a popular study space. The timelines for completing this project are still up in the air due to the necessary pause in construction work during this time. And I also just want to mention that another major component of our students' work is paging material from the many storage spaces around the building and tracking their statuses. So while our on-site materials are scattered throughout the building, around 2/3 of our collection materials are actually housed in off-site storage. And requested materials are delivered about once a day in the mornings. So given all of this information, it takes a good deal of coordination on our end to make sure that researchers' materials are ready to go for them when they come in. So during this period of continued construction, we decided to move to an appointment-only system so that we could have time to prepare each researchers' materials before they arrived. The preparation also includes the reference associates assessing the condition of each and every item that's slated for researcher use to make sure that that material is safe to handle. Until we closed, we'd been serving around 18 to 24 researchers per day, meaning that the space in our reading room would fill up on most days. And this makes scheduling appointments even more important as we don't necessarily hold space for walk-in researchers because we actually have so many appointments scheduled. So we're always happy to take your questions in person or over the phone, and you don't need an appointment to come in and ask a question or take a look around our space. I would, however, recommend making a consultation appointment with one of our curators or reference associates if you want to have a longer conversation about a broader project topic so that you can guarantee that our staff can schedule you in. I finally just want to make sure that I mention that our reading room and our use of our collections is open to the public. Many of our researchers come from other countries and continents, and we realized, in fact, that the majority of our researchers are not affiliated with NYU. Even without an appointment, folks not affiliated with NYU are welcome to come in, look around, and ask questions. This has at least been the case in the past year. We're still not totally sure how we're going to handle this the next academic year while we're still living with the threat and restrictions that COVID has placed on us. So the next slide, please. I'm now just going to touch briefly on the process of requesting materials for use and making an appointment to research with us. If you've been to any other large special collections, library, or archives, you've probably already been introduced to Aeon. Aeon is an automated request and workflow management software specifically designed for special collections, libraries, and archives. Before coming into research with us, you'll be asked to create an Aeon account, kind of like a profile. Nicole can drop the link to do so now. You'll be able to request material for use in our reading room through this account and track the status of those requests. We're then able to communicate with you about what you'll need to know about these requests for your appointment. You can move on to the next slide, please. You can make requests through links in the finding aids for archival collection material and the catalog records in Bobcat for special collections, books, and periodicals. We have more instructions for how to place these requests online and even more detailed instructions on how to place requests and find what you're looking for if you email us at special.collections@nyu.edu. I just want to make sure that I say we're always happy to help you with your questions about Aeon. There can be a steep learning curve with using this program, and we want to continue to make research with us as accessible as possible while we use it. Okay, so next slide, please. Switching gears entirely, we also have a new dedicated gallery space, which is also open to the public, in 2 self-contained exhibition rooms and a large entranceway to the reading room, which is also used as an exhibition space. We hope to be able to put on 2 or 3 exhibitions per calendar year, curated by our own staff, as well as members of our own community, including, hopefully, students. Our inaugural show, which opened in October 2019, I hope you all were able to see it because it just came down before we closed for the pandemic. It had exhibition cases curated by staff members around the themes of our choice, and it was titled The Things We Choose. We had an exhibition scheduled to open on March 26th, unluckily, entitled Pan Modern, the Mark Block Postal Art Network Archive, curated by artist Mark Block, whose papers we have, and Nicholas, which he's actually going to talk about in just a few moments. But moving forward, I am, along with 2 other special collections reference associates, Jasmine Sykes-Kunk and Danielle Nista. The 3 of us are curating an exhibition for the fall that centers on the lives of women of color in our collections, and we'll have a critical eye on archival theory and practice as it relates to the representation of these women. As NYU is planning to come into session in a mixed modality in the fall, we're planning on making a large component of the exhibition digital. Next slide, please. So the last space that I'm going to talk about, these are the special collections classrooms on the 2nd floor, dedicated for our department's use. It's important for us to be able to teach with primary sources in these designated spaces because students need to be able to safely store their bags, coats, and food and drink away from the collection materials for the duration of the class. There are 3 large classrooms, one which has a capacity of 60 people, the others with capacities around 30. We also have the Elmer Holmes Books seminar room with a capacity of about 12. Our staff teaches with our collection material in these classrooms almost every day of the week, often multiple classes going on at the same time, touching on topics as diverse as our collections are. Some of our colleagues will talk a little bit more about their teaching experiences at a later point in the presentation, but next slide, please. So going forward, it's been great to talk with all of you about how we set up our work this past year, but it's probably going to have to change pretty dramatically for this next academic year. For the past 3 months, as you know, we haven't been in the building working with these spaces or our in-person researchers or our collections. Given what we know about the fall, we're still not sure about how we're going to be able to serve our researchers and the logistics of opening to the public. So we may need to drastically reimagine our scanning and remote reference work in order to support researchers who cannot come and use our collections in person. We'll also likely need to restructure our classes and classroom use. Next slide, please. I also want to make sure we acknowledge the work of our other colleagues in the libraries, especially from the Archival Collections Management Departments, DTLS, and the Conservation Department, without whom none of this work would be at all possible. We work really closely with these departments and others to make all of this magic happen. So with that, it's time to turn it over to the round robin portion of our event and hear from each of our other colleagues in special collections on what they've been up to since we were last all together, or to talk about what we've been missing. And Nicholas is going to kick it off.
Thank you, Allison. Nice to see you all again, or to have you see me, as it were. Next slide, please. So I'm going to keep this one a little bit brief and get myself out of the way. As Allison mentioned, prior to the pandemic, we've been working on an exhibition of materials from the Mark Bloch Postal Art Network archive, which is a part of the downtown collection. The exhibition was scheduled to open on the 26th of March. We were just getting ready to install it when we had to leave the building. That show is entitled Pan Modern, the Mark Bloch Postal Art Network archive. Mark's collection contains thousands of examples of original mail art sent to and collected by Mark in New York City from all 50 states and dozens of countries in the form of objects, envelopes, artwork, enclosures, as well as publications, postcards, and announcements documenting avant-garde cultural activities in various media. From the 1970s to the 2000s, really. It's a truly engrossing collection, 55 linear feet in size, representing 40 plus years of communication art. The exhibition, which barely scratches the surface of this rich collection, tells the story of communication art as Mark has experienced it from the days when mail art was just that, artwork and performance involving the postal system, through periods of amazing experimentation in early online and telecommunications environments. We hope to install the show at some point, but we are also exploring opportunities for bringing this work online. So we're open to suggestions if you have any ideas about good ways to do this kind of a show. In the meantime, if you find Mark on Facebook, and Nicole, thank you for dropping the Pan Modern page, Facebook users. Mark has been instigating mail art activities all summer since we went into quarantine as a way to keep the work alive, even though we can't actually put on the show right now. Okay, so with that, I'm going to pivot away from presenter and into the role of moderator. I'm going to be moving us from one speaker to the next, and our next speaker is Charlotte Priddle. So when I turn it over to you, speakers, please tell us what your job title is, and then go ahead and jump into your presentation. So next slide, please, and Charlotte, take it away.
Thanks, Nicholas. And thank you everybody for attending this, and also to everybody who helped organize it. This is wonderful. So my name is Charlotte Priddle. I am the director of the NYU Special Collections and also the curator of the printed books. And I'm actually kind of talking under that head right now. One of the things that you can see here is actually one of our most recent acquisitions. And I wanted to highlight this because I think it's something that's really interesting and something that appeals to me. We managed to add this actually, despite being closed, through connections with some of the small vendors and dealers that we work with very closely. And the image here shows the Oracle or Book of Fate ladies fan. It's a late 18th, early 19th century fortune telling device, like the ones you used to make at school out of paper. It has some very caustic advice on this for young women around marriage prospects, money and family life. And it really kind of offers an insight into what are perhaps surprisingly realistic views on courtship and relationships within the English middle and upper classes during this period. So some of the advice that it offers, there's just a couple of rhyming couplets which I appreciated very much when I read them. The first of which is, "With your old aunts forbear to clash, caress and court them for their cash." And another one is, "With nuptial ties yourself to fetter, 'tis well, but to be free is better." So it's part parlor game and part kind of honest view of what potentially lay in store for many young women of this class, and men perhaps, on the marriage market. It really represents an insight into the realities that lie behind a lot of the classic romances of this period that we still read. And it also, for me, kind of extends our ideas of what a book can be. You know, I am the curator for printed books. This is not what we would necessarily think of as a book. But I think we need to think about text as being of different kinds and formats. And these things can really give us an insight into the lives and experiences of people from the past. Often these kind of more ephemeral things are more hard to find. They pass out of fashion, they're liable to get lost, they're liable to get used and to get damaged in ways that don't really happen to, you know, the codex, the printed book as we think of it. So this was just one of the many, many fascinating things that we have in special collections. And now I'm going to pass it on. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. I have seen this fan. It is one of those objects that, thinking in terms of digitization and working remotely, I cannot imagine how you can really get this thing without actually seeing it. Next up is Julie Park. So next slide, and Julie, take it away. Julie, you are muted at the moment.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So I'm Julie Park. I'm an assistant curator and faculty fellow in NYU Special Collections and visiting faculty in the English department. I come to NYU through its 2-year Provost postdoctoral fellowship program. And I'm also a scholar of 18th century material and visual culture, as well as a former English professor. During my time here, I've been teaching an introduction to book history seminar to undergraduate students and curating an exhibition on the interactive book. I wanted to share with everyone some highlights from my book history class. An important component of the class was teaching students skills in interpreting books as historical objects through close interactions and patient observations of their physical features. So you can imagine how reliant this class was on meeting in person and having access to physical books. Fortunately, there was already a digital component with the class, which was having the students do an online digital exhibition of the pop-up exhibition we were supposed to do for the last day of class. And so the slide shows a page from the digital exhibition. You can see the array. You can sort of make out the array of exhibitions that the students put together based on books that they were told to adopt at the beginning of the semester. And to the right are just some details from their presentations. And so the exhibition spanned a wide swathe of cultural history. They covered scientific illustrations of early books, the material traces of the NYU's collection of different editions of Sir Philip Sidney's Arcadia, and the book design of Oscar Wilde's controversial picture of Dorian Gray, in which the student demonstrated how the book's ornament conveyed its subversive intent. So that's about all I can say for now, and I'm happy to answer more questions about the exhibitions and how we negotiated the challenge of turning a class based on working with material objects to an online format. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. And Julie will be curating an exhibition for our galleries in the spring as the culmination of her fellowship. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be really amazing too. Our next speaker is Lindsay Anderberg. Lindsay, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about the Poly Archives and to talk about this work actually done by one of our students, so one of our most recent projects. And I'm excited about it for many reasons. Being at the Poly Archives, one of the things that I'm constantly working on is outreach and engagement with engineers and engineering students, who is not always the population that thinks of themselves as archival users or contributors to archives, but there's a lot of information that engineers can access through our collections. Sometimes it's very technical reports, patents, things like that, but there's also other areas that you can dive into. And this student, Joel Urania, was able, yes, Nicole's putting up the link, so he was awarded a fellowship through ARL, the Digital Inclusive Excellence Fellowship. And because he had this fellowship, he was actually able to spend 2 full semesters working on the research of this project and putting it together. And it's really focused around identity in terms of engineering students. His methodology here was actually to look at every single yearbook that we had in the collection cover to cover. So that was from 1887 to 2009. And so while he did that, he was taking extensive notes and reference photographs, and he was looking through this lens of, he wanted to find the voices and histories of Black and Latinx students. And then he also wanted to connect these stories to students today, because the longer he spent in the archives, the more he was like, this is really cool. And I love learning about the history of my institution. And I love seeing people that actually do look like me. Like, I thought that, our school started in 1854. It was male and white. But it changes over time. And he was like, this is great. I don't think the fellow students that I talk to know about this. So he got really interested in doing outreach as well. So what you're seeing on the screen, it's 2 screenshots from his project. I really encourage you to go and look at the website. The static screenshots here don't really do it justice. But what he did, you can kind of see some of the images that he was looking at, but the ultimate thing here was and the working title of the project was the Poly Apparel Project. So he was taking these images and then he was using his design skills to, so for example, the engineers, that sweatshirt with the yellow background, if you look at it online, you'll see the piece of apparel, but then you can also see the reference images that he was using to create this collage. And he was working with student clubs, both NSBE and SHEP, so that's the National, I always get acronyms wrong, National Society for Black Engineers and the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers on campus to kind of like get their feedback and community support and buy-in for these things too. So the plan was going to be, Joelle was always really interested in this concept of an invitation to the archives. So the plan was going to be that students were going to be wearing these shirts and hoodies around campus and people would be like, what is that? I want to know more about that. Obviously, kind of on the theme of everyone else, with the campus, being closed starting in March, he wasn't able to actualize that piece of it, but he was able to complete the website. He was able to complete all of the designs for the shirts. And even though Joelle has now graduated, he and I are continuing to work on this in 2 different I don't know, what am I thinking of? 2 different ways. One is to actually create the shirts to get them produced. At some point, we will, things will open up more and we'll actually get them made. And we're hoping to have people wearing them. But 2 is that we're also partnering with the Tandon Alumni Relations Office to do some oral histories of the people that are featured in here so that you can kind of dive down through layers in this site. You can see the reference images from the archives, you can see the shirt, and then you could also go in and learn more about this person. And this is really, Joelle got really attracted to a lot of the images here are kind of from like a 1968 to 1970 time period, which was, as you can imagine, like an era where Black students were this is when the Black Student Union was formed. There's a lot more, there's also protests, there's activism. So a lot of parallels to today, and also advantageous for us that the 1970 class Golden Jubilee, so their 50th anniversary is happening this year. So this was a good time for us to do some outreach to those people and to get their stories as well. So this project will continue. We hope that it serves as an invitation to the archives for you, and also just to think about the really creative and excellent work that our students can do when they have access to these collections, even at an undergraduate level. I just thought this project was really brilliant, and I'm excited you got to see a piece of it. Definitely check out the website. Thank you.
That is amazing. That's so cool. Okay, next we have Mike Konsolitz. Next slide. Take it away, Mike.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Konsolitz. I'm the Cold War Collection Specialist at Tamerman Wagner. I want to thank both Nicholas and Allison for organizing this event. Since NYU acquired the Tamerman collections nearly 60 years ago, our staff have taken materials from a wide range of individuals and organizations from all across labor and the left. Nicholas mentioned several of them. One former Tamerman Wagner director, Deborah Bernhardt, once referred to Tamerman as the Switzerland of the left, where many points of view are welcome. So if you think about that, Tamerman Wagner is a truly unique site for research, education, and discussion on the history of social justice movements. One way we make sure that it remains a special place is through our public programs. And with support from our donors from the Frederick Ewan Center and support for the Cold War Center, Shannon O'Neill and I have organized a number of events that are connected to our collections with activists and scholars. Over the last year, we have hosted book talks on American policing, anti-communist purges in New York City teachers, a sing-along of songs from the labor and civil rights movement, and a panel discussion on the next generation of labor journalism. For the fall, we already have several virtual seminars and lectures lined up, including a forum on white supremacist groups with scholars Kathleen Ballou and Ibram Kendi. These events not only foster an ongoing discussion on the current state of the left and labor in this country, but have also helped us reconnect with our community. This has been especially true in our many talks with New York City's labor community over the last year, as our events have helped spark numerous conversations and meetings with labor activists and organizations about future collecting, something Shannon will talk about later on in her remarks. So thank you again, Nicholas and Allison, for organizing this, and thank you for including me in this event.
Thanks, Mike. Next up on the next slide is Janet Bundy. Go ahead, Janet.
Hey, everybody. I'm so grateful to all of you who are here as attendees for spending your time with us today. And thanks also to my amazing colleagues, some of whom you've already heard from and some of whom you'll be hearing from later. I would like to spend my time in this round robin discussion to talk about a project that I'm really looking forward to beginning next month. Earlier this year, NYU Special Collections, along with other colleagues both within and outside of NYU libraries, received a digital humanities seed grant through the NYU Center for the Humanities. And we plan to use the funding that we received through that grant to accomplish two goals: to transform a set of audio recordings from one of our collections into data, and to build community around that process and around that collection. And how do we plan to do that, especially now that we can't meet in person? Well, the first part of our project and the work that will actually begin next month will invite interested people, hopefully many of you, to begin correcting computer-generated transcriptions of these audio recordings. The image that you're looking at now is my best attempt to take an image of an audio recording. This is a schedule from WNYU, NYU's radio station, that talks about the program that these audio recordings represent. They are episodes of a radio program called Soul of Reason, which was a half-hour interview format radio program hosted by Dr. Roscoe Brown, who was formerly the head of the Institute for Afro-American Affairs at NYU, as the Institute was then known. According to founding documents found in the Institute's records, Soul of Reason was intended to be a showcase for Black scholarship to examine the foundations of African-American thought from a variety of areas. Interviewees include Joan Maynard, who was executive director of the Society for the Preservation of Weeksville and Bedford-Stuyvesant History, David Dinkins, who at the time of the interview was the chairman for the Council of Black Elected Democrats in New York State, but of course, and perhaps obviously to many of us, was later mayor of New York City, Percy Sutton, a former New York State Assemblyman and borough president of Manhattan, and visual artist Romare Bearden, among hundreds of others. Information about those events will be forthcoming, but please feel free to reach out to me directly. My contact information is later in this presentation if you're interested in participating. Thanks again, and that's what I've got.
Thank you, Janet. Our next presenter is Shannon O'Neill. Shannon? Shannon, you are muted.
Thank you. Sorry, the funny things with Zoom. I was just expressing my thanks to everybody for being here with us, and thanks to my colleagues for making this opportunity to share a little bit more about our work. So again, my name is Shannon O'Neill. I'm the curator for the Tamiment Wagner collections. And what I really wanted to highlight here is a thing that I deeply appreciate about being a part of the Special Collections Department is our commitment to care, not just for the incredible materials and histories that we have the privilege of working with every day, and not just for the individuals who use our collections, but the deep care that we have for the communities who create these collections and who are documented within these collections. And I would say that my colleagues and I are really committed to supporting documentation efforts, especially when and where we can make assurances for the safety of those who are being documented. Beginning in April with the guidance, support, and hard work of web archivist Nicole Greenhouse, we began investing significant effort to document highly ephemeral online content related to the COVID-19 crisis, with a particular focus on mutual aid efforts happening across our city. This ongoing effort is inclusive of union websites and websites from activists who have consented to us documenting their work. And I want to pause here and really name the vulnerability that activists, especially Black activists and organizers who have been leading movements for decades and who are leading this current transformative movement face. So as much as documentation can be a space for empowerment and healing, in the hands of the state, it can also be a tool for oppression, surveillance, and violence. So I just want to share that if you're currently documenting protests in your city or in New York City, I really urge you to do so with care. Before you post any content online, make sure that the faces in the crowd are obscured, and you can use a tool like Image Scrubber to do that, or better yet, don't take any photographs that feature protesters' faces unless you've received their clear consent. And since we almost all take our photographs digitally, you should also know that the metadata that is associated with your digital photograph matters. And that metadata marks where and when a photograph was taken and what kind of device it was taken on and more. So rather than posting an original digital photo, it's frequently recommended that you take a snapshot of that photo first and post the snapshot instead of the actual original photograph. I would like to highly recommend that you learn about the work of Witness and Documenting the Now, which are two organizations that have been working in the field of documenting activism and human rights for a long time. Both of these organizations give really important guidelines on ethics and safety considerations when documenting activism. And when in doubt, I think it's just always really important to start from a place of consent and relationship building, which are two of the core values of the work that we do together in special collections. And thank you. I'll turn it over to the next individual.
Thanks, Shannon. Next up is Jasmine Sykes-Kunk. Go ahead, Jasmine.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again to Nicholas and Allison for organizing this and the other people who coordinate the Getting to Know series. And thank you everyone for coming. As reference associates, one of our main responsibilities is to support our researchers as they prepare for and visit our reading room. What I enjoy most about this and what I look forward to going back to are the possibilities of collaboration with our library colleagues to enhance the patrons' research. So the images on the slide are from the Martin Wong papers from Thales Library. And these are images of his collection of work that is called the Sign Language Scrolls. Earlier this year, these scrolls were being treated by the Preservation and Conservation Department when we received a request from an international researcher to view them. Well, actually, 2 months prior to that researcher's visit, we had been corresponding and suggesting collections that would work with their research. And the Wong papers was one of the collections we identified. With the assistance of the conservation librarian, Laura McCann, and my colleague Felix Esquivel, the collections manager, who you'll hear from shortly, these scrolls were brought up to the reading room from the conservation lab. And Laura and Felix were able to share some contextual information about the scrolls that was discovered during that treatment process. This was really invaluable for the researcher because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to handle the material since they were undergoing treatment, and the researcher came from really far away and only had a limited amount of time in the reading room. Once the treatment was completed, we were able to offer the researcher the remote reference photographs so that they could examine them carefully and closely. This patron's visit is one of the memorable opportunities that we in Special Collections are able to support. I don't know what our reading room visits will look like in the future, but I look forward to finding new ways to support the researchers and the challenges and great opportunities for learning they present. Thanks, and I'm going to turn it back to Nicholas.
Thank you, Jasmine, for pointing that out. I love that project too. Danielle Nista is next.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. I'm excited to share some ideas that I've had about instruction at NYU Special Collections for this year. Teaching NYU undergraduates and graduate students about working with archival materials is one of my favorite parts about my job. One of the benefits of taking a class at the archive is being able to come into our space and work directly with collections, but that has obviously changed dramatically. The pandemic has presented us, though, with a new opportunity to think about our goals for instruction and how students can still get the experience of working with collection material without physically being here. This past semester, when I was still pivoting towards the online format, I was really thinking about what exactly I wanted students to get out of the class. I realized that a question that has always engaged students is, well, why don't we just digitize everything? So I kind of used that as a springboard for the direction the class took. I used the image on the right for the Spanish Civil War poster collection in the class and told the students that we were looking at a surrogate of a physical poster. As part of their analysis of the item, I asked students what they gained and lost by working with the digital image of the poster. The students had a really great discussion about appreciating their ability to zoom in and out on small details, but also longing to see the true size and colors of the object. In centering the reality of the online experience, the students really gained a greater appreciation of the importance of physical access at an archive. Looking forward to the upcoming semester, I have gotten more involved with the Teaching with Primary Sources, or TPS, collaborative, which has given me the chance to work with colleagues from other institutions across the country. I presented my experience in online teaching with this group, which started conversations about what other institutions are doing to accommodate the shift to online instruction. These lessons about new tools have brought in my ideas of what I can do at NYU to be a more effective instructor, and I am grateful for the chance to connect with so many people. This inter-institution collaboration has also led to discussions about the content relationships between our collections, which can help show students the research process is necessarily an interconnected web rather than kind of a one-stop shopping deal. I will continue to participate in the TPS group as the summer and semester move forward so that I can empower students in their archival research. I am looking forward to what this year's instruction brings, much more than usual. Thank you very much for listening. I'll turn it back over to Nicholas.
Thanks, Danielle. It's Allison's turn to come back into the conversation.
I'm back. Thanks, everyone. I just wanted to really quickly touch on a project that I've been working on with Jasmine, Danielle, and Felix, who's going to speak after me. We have been browsing in a systematic way the websites of our peer institutions to see if our reading room policies and services are consistent with theirs. Just to make sure we're kind of on the same page with where we should be, with what other institutions ask of their researchers ahead of time. Our peer institutions being, actually, we're surveying every other special collections and library and archive that uses AON in North America. We're then going to make a narrower list of institutions to survey about their paging and appointment workflows, and actually hopefully like send out an actual survey to them to see how we can maybe more align our paging and reading room workflows with theirs. See, basically, if anybody has any good ideas, we can steal, honestly. We're using Airtable to track our findings of this website survey, which I've attached some very boring and blurry screenshots on this slide, but that's what the work is looking like. But with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Nicholas. Thanks.
Great. And last we have Felix Esquivel. Go ahead, Felix.
Hi, everyone. I'm Felix Esquivel. I'm the collections manager of special collections. I'm responsible for the physical integrity of all special collection materials. I work closely with the reference associates, curators, conservators, and archivists in determining collection management tasks, such as finding adequate storage of materials, assessing possible conservation treatments, and facilitating archival processing projects, among others. Like my colleagues, I use AON to track on-site and off-site materials requested by researchers. I use AON to track damaged materials delivered to the preservation department for conservation treatments. And I also use AON to track materials needing processing sent to the archival collections management department. I assist with the supervision of students, workers during paging and reshelving of materials. I teach them the unique organization schemes of each one of the 3 special collections repositories. I also show students where to find materials in the 8 storage locations spread across 4 floors of Bob's library. And I train the staff on proper storage and handling of materials. There's a link to that. Did anyone mention that we're renovating? I also work very closely with the Director of Special Collections, Charlotte Priddle, on planning the move of materials to the permanent locations after the renovation is completed. I have been supervising students on preparing materials before they are moved within the building or before they are sent to the offsite storage facility. And I ensure contractors safely handle materials during moving, and I supervise the shelf reading. I also update the new locations in archive space, the archival collections management database that we use. I want to finish by thanking my coworkers for helping me design my new position this past year and for helping me redesign it again when we open, and also for including me in this presentation.
Did you say we're renovating?
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. That's everything we have for you today. We're just hitting 1 o'clock, so we went a little bit over. We apologize for that. If there are any questions, you want to throw them in the chat right now. Those of us who are able to stick around for another minute or 2 will certainly do so. So please feel free to either raise your hand or type a question into the chat. Okay, we have a question from Lucy. Hi, Lucy, about viewing the recording. That might be a good one for Liz and or Nicole to answer.
I can help out with the recording question. So we will have the recording ready later today or tomorrow, and we will send it out to everyone who RSVP'd. So if you want to watch this later, you can do so, Lucy. I can also tackle the next question about alumni access. So Michael, alumni can get access to BOPE. So we are working on a reopening plan for BOPE's library and the other libraries as well as part of NYU. It is going to depend on city and state regulations. We don't really quite have a date yet. Education is in stage 4 of Governor Cuomo's plan. And we're not really sure when stage 4 will begin. So I would hang tight. When we know, we will definitely push that information out. I get that question a lot. And more to come, essentially, based on state and city guidelines.
I just wanted to add that the NYU Special Collections is open to the public. So if you wanted to come in to see any of our materials, you can make an appointment. You just have to go through the Aon request. You have to make an Aon account that was dropped in the chat earlier. So everybody can come, anyone can come, alumni included.
Thank you, Jasmine.
We've got a question follow-up for Janet. Janet, are you still with us? And do you want to say a little more?
I am. So thank you so much for the question, which was about how you can get more information about the transcription editing events that we're going to be hosting next month. One way to do that is just to email me directly, and I'm happy to provide details once we have them. We're still in the process of scheduling those dates and nailing down times, making sure that we have sufficient tech support on our end to support what will wind up being kind of a distributed online event that we had originally planned to be an in-person collective event. So once those details are nailed down, then all of that information will be available somewhere on the library website. It will also be pushed out through our various communication channels. But if you go ahead and send me an email directly registering your interest, then I'm happy to make sure that once those details are nailed down, that I send that to you personally.
We've got a question about the Alba collection. I think Shannon and Mike might both have some insight there.
Sure. Hi, Joe. Work with the ALBA collections is always ongoing. I know, so I'm not sure if maybe if you could clarify what you mean by working with the ALBA collections, if you mean collections processing or outreach, digitizing. That's a yes and an ongoing question for us. One of the things that we do in our work is each year we set a series of priorities for both digitizing and processing. And we make sure to have a clear view of all of the communities' histories that we support and really try to evenly distribute work across the collections. So I would say that is a yes and an ongoing effort for us.
There are some really interesting photos that are available that were digitized in the ALBA collection. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to talk about? We're a few minutes over. Maybe it's a good time to call it. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to all of my fellow speakers. It's wonderful to see your names. Reach out to us. You've got all of our emails here. There's a big email for everybody. We love email. And we hope to talk to you all soon.
Thanks for coming, everyone. We'll talk to you later.
Does he have a question?
When is lunch, I think is the question.